we've had a number of people asking questions about the consultation processes on issues relevant for people with disability, including access to justice. How is the Royal Commission consulting with the community on these issues in terms of access to justice?
Thank you very much. Couple of things. The first thing is that in relation to a number of the key issues, we've put out what we call issues papers, and those issues papers have dealt with a number of key areas or themes, and we've been seeking input from the community and from bodies and groups, peak bodies and advocacy groups in relation to those. And so the most important thing we've been doing is seeking that input directly through these issues papers. The second thing, we've actually been having a series of what we call roundtables. Now, we haven't done them on some of the areas, but we've done them on working with children's checks. We did a session in relation to out-of-home care, which covers both foster care and kinship care. We will be having roundtables in relation to redress schemes shortly. But in relation to all of the key areas, including the criminal justice system, at the appropriate time, we will be having roundtables. And to each of those roundtables, we invite those that have made submissions, not all of them, but some of those, and those that have a particular keen interest or represent a particular part of the community that has a particular interest. So when we come to the criminal justice area, we're doing a couple of specific things. Firstly, there's been a working group of experts to advise the Royal Commission in relation to the research. The second, we've actually undertaken a very substantial research agenda in relation to the criminal justice system itself. The third thing we will then do is we will have a consultation period with some of those that have put in submissions, including those within the disability community. Fourth thing we'll do is we will have a roundtable or roundtables at the appropriate time. Fifthly, we have to make a decision at that point as to whether we put out a draft report in relation to the criminal justice issues, because they're so significant, before we actually put out a final report. In some areas we will not do that, we'll actually go out to a final report, so that hasn't been determined. But let me make a couple of points about it. We're absolutely attuned to some of the issues that relate to people with disabilities and their access or lack thereof into the criminal justice system. Now, many of you would be aware of how difficult it is to engage in the criminal justice system. Two or three things I just want to say about it. The first is we had a public hearing in Adelaide. This was in relation to a Catholic school for children with disabilities, a range of disabilities, both physical and intellectual disabilities, predominantly intellectual disabilities. The children were abused by a bus driver who was also a woodwork teaching volunteer, and this happened some time ago. One of the key issues of that public hearing was in fact the way in which the police handled the investigations. And that report will come out in the next couple of months about that. And we specifically looked at the way in which the police interacted with a couple of the children that were abused. And the tragedy was that in fact, because they had disabilities, intellectual disabilities, their evidence was totally discounted. And as a consequence of that, prosecutions did not take place in the way that they perhaps should have done so. What was interesting is the Royal Commission, when it had its first hearing in Adelaide, on the first day we heard evidence from a number of the victims, some through their family members, but we actually had a young man who was in fact one of the most severely abused children come forward and gave his testimony in another room via a video link which was pixelated, and he gave extraordinary evidence to that case study in the public hearing. His mere presence said to everybody who was watching it in the room, the courtroom, and everyone who was watching it on the live stream, because all the case studies are live stream, they would have been able to form a view about the credibility of that man. Now, I won't make any comments further than that, but it's brought into stark contrasts that preconceptions about people with disabilities can be an extraordinary impediment to achieving a just outcome. The second thing is we actually are looking at specifically the way in which the justice system deals with people with disabilities as witnesses generally. And part of the research that we're looking at is going to be touching on that particular area. And again, we would welcome from the deaf community their particular insights, the particular struggles or difficulties they've faced, particularly in relation to child sexual abuse, but more generally at the appropriate time. And we will certainly be liaising with the deaf community through your peak bodies at the appropriate time in relation to the criminal justice system. It's a very, very major issue that we are deeply concerned about.